I'm gonna show you 3 things that really help me be more efficient when I'm fishing the topwater bait. Number 1, the biggest thing that I have changed in my topwater fishing over the years that's helped me be more efficient is I use exclusively braided line. Why do I use braided line? For a couple reasons. Obviously, it's more buoyant. It almost floats, so it keeps my bait on top of the surface and it takes less effort to work it. When I'm working a bait like this is a 𝗙𝗻𝗋𝗋 bait. It's a walking style bait. The other thing is I can cast this bait a long way away. And when I'm making a long cast like that, if I'm using mono, it's really hard to get that bait to do what I want to do because the mono has so much stretch in it. But when I'm using braid, the fact that it has no stretch in it, every little rod tip motion is transferred to the bait, so it makes it easier to walk. The other thing is when I catch a fish, when I have one blow up on it out there 50, 60 yards, I don't have to set the hook. All I got to do is keep reeling, and that helps me hook up on fish a lot better. I've also switched to a much shorter rod. This rod that I'm using right here is a 7-footer. Why do I use a 7-foot rod? It's simply for this reason right here. When I'm making those little small corrections with the bait, when I'm just trying to manipulate the bait, make it walk side to side, walk the dog, it's a whole lot easier on my body when I've got a 7-foot or shorter reel or rod, shorter rod. It's a lot less fatigue on the wrist, it's a lot less fatigue on the shoulders, and you can just be a lot more efficient with the bait. Third thing is reel speed. I use a much faster reel when I'm using a topwater bait, especially a walking bait like this 𝗙𝗻𝗋𝗋 that I'm throwing right now. For 2 reasons. I can really work that bait fast. I fish here at home where we have spotted bass that are chasing herring, and I want to work that bait as fast as I can. In clear water, the faster you work that bait, the better your chances are getting the fish to strike it. The other thing is when a fish hits the bait, he's almost always coming up behind it and he's moving towards you with the bait. When I've got that faster reel, I'm not setting the hook, I'm not having to do anything. All I do is speed my reel up a little bit and that fish gets hooked immediately. And I promise you, you're gonna catch a lot more fish with braided line and a faster reel than you will with mono. Try those couple tips when you're out there fishing a topwater, especially when you're using a walking style bait like this, and I promise you, you're gonna have some of the most exciting bites that you'll have all year. I'm also going to fish this chatterbait in and around these willow bushes. You know, willow bushes are a great place to fish chatterbait. And right now I'm using the black and blue chatterbait with the palmetto bugs trailer on the back of it. And that's what in my mind is just a perfect little brim presentation right there. And brim love to hang around the shade of willow trees like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip my chatterbait in and around places like that. You see how well that bait skips way back in there. I'll skip it around any of that stuff, just looking for bass just setting up under there in that shade of that willow tree, waiting for somebody to come by and take advantage of it. The basic thing that you want to look for in all of these places is just ambush points. Anywhere, especially when you're talking about largemouth bass, anywhere there's ambush points, something that he can set up beside. Anywhere there's a little bit darker water, anywhere there's a little bit of current is always an ambush place as well. Shade is an ambush place. Docks, willow trees, grass, anything that he can hide and he feels a little bit more comfortable in. You bring that chatterbait by and there's a good chance you're going to get bit. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip my chatterbait in and around places like that. You see how well that bait skips way back in there. I'll skip it around any of that stuff, just looking for bass just setting up under there in that shade of that willow tree, waiting for somebody to come by and take advantage of it. Now this is a great example of a place where I like to fish a chatterbait. You can see this is where I live, we call this grass, but it's actually not grass. That's called dog fennel. It's actually a woody type plant It grows when the lake is down, when the water comes back up, it's flooded, and it's really just a good place for fish to spawn in. A lot of forest species live in this, shad live in it, brim live in it. It's just a good habitat. But you can see I can bring that chatterbait right through that stuff without it getting hung up. This is prime territory to throw a chatterbait. You know, one of the highest percentage places that you can fish a chatterbait is around aquatic vegetation. And even though this isn't true aquatic vegetation, this is a really good place to take this bait and get a couple different style profiles. You know, right now I'm throwing the spot remover, which is more like a shad profile, and I'm just bringing it through that grass, and I can see that silver blade flashing all the way back to the boat. So anytime you can find any kind of grass or anything like that, any kind of aquatic vegetation in the water, lily pads, hydrilla, milfoil, that's the best place to throw the chatterbait, because you can work it through that stuff so well. And the little trailer that I'm using, when I'm reeling it through there and it gets snagged on a piece of grass, and I just kind of give it a real quick pop like that, that tail just kind of, as the bait frees up and it falls back down, you can just see that tail just kind of wiggling as the bait goes back down. And a lot of times that's when you get the strike. You kind of rip it through that grass, let the bait fall back down real slowly, and you'll get a bite that way. There he is. Oh, crankbait showing out today, dude. Oh, golden boy. He's golden, all right. He come up schooling right here under the bridge. I didn't even get to talk about what we're actually going to talk about today. But what we are going to talk about is, with crankbaits, angles are important. It's everything, especially when you're talking about a shallow diving crankbait. Getting the correct angle on the bank at the structure you're fishing, it makes all the difference in whether your crankbait hits what you're fishing, and it makes all the difference in whether you're going to get a bite or not. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about today, and hopefully it'll make you a better than average crankbait fisherman. I've got a little bank here. This is a rock bank that we're about to fish here, and a crankbait, in my opinion, is probably one of the best reaction baits. Obviously, you know, jigs, Texas rigs, crawl baits. There's a multitude of different ways you could fish a bank like this. It's got a lot of rock. It's just a creek turn. It's got shelf rock on it, a little bit of chunk rock. And there's a lot of different baits you could use to fish it. But for right now, what I'm trying to do is fish it fairly quickly. I want to cover some water. And in my opinion, the best reaction bait is going to be a Squarebill Crankbait. Obviously, with the Squarebill, it just deflects off structure a little differently. One thing that I definitely noticed about it, you know, a lot of your crankbaits, you see this crankbait's got like just a real low pitch rattle to it. And anytime that crankbait deflects off a rock, you run it into a rock, it's down there digging, and it deflects off a rock, the pitch of the rattle changes. So it's just down there, it makes a lot of different noises when it's running into the rocks. If you've ever jiggled a crankbait around in the tackle box, you've noticed it makes a lot of different noises. Well, the same thing is going on underwater. Is one reason I like to run my crankbait in the rocks. But the angles, getting that crankbait to run into the rocks, if you don't have the right angle, it's not going to contact the structure. You're not going to get that sound, that audio from it, that audio stimulation from the fish. So you're going to catch less fish. So it's really important when I'm talking about angles. Long story short, I'm talking about boat position, because if you don't have the right boat position, your bait's not coming in contact with the structure, and you're just not going to catch as many fish. What I'm trying to do, I know this crankbait is going to dive anywhere between 3 to 5 foot. So I'm going to position my boat. When I look down at my graph, I'm going to position my boat to where I keep the boat in that 3 to 6 foot range, and I'm going to cast down the bank, parallel down the bank. That way the bait stays in the structure longer. So right here, you can say I'm going to cast it down here. Right there is where I think 3 to 6 foot range is going to be. Sometimes I'm going to cast it shallower, sometimes I'm going to cast it a little deeper. But what happens is, when I'm fishing it like this, as opposed to getting off 15, 20 foot off the bank and casting perpendicular to the bank, my bait's in the strike zone longer. And if I do happen to get bit, I have a better read on how shallow or how deep the fish are. So if I throw it really, really close up to the bank like we did earlier today, I throw it up there really close to the rocks, and then I get bait, you know, boom, I catch one. I know that, hey, those fish are feeding a little bit shallower. They're in that 2, there's one right there. Right there, just while I'm trying to talk to you. He's not very big,
that fish was up there really, really shallow. So come here, let me do my job, please, sir. I'm trying to do an instructional and you're making it hard on me. It's a little spotted bass. But that fish was up there really shallow, probably more like in 2 foot. So I know to keep my crankbait closer to the bank in that 2 foot range. If I cast out here a little bit more to the right, I can easily get a read on where my crankbait is for the entire retrieve. So I can cast it out to the right, boom, I catch one. Now I know I don't waste time when I'm casting this way. My crankbait's only in 2 foot or 3 foot, wherever the fish we determine to be, only for a small amount of time. When I'm casting parallel like this, it's in that strike zone the entire retrieve back. That is going to help me catch a lot more fish. I don't know what that was. That's going to help me catch a lot more fish. So keeping that bait in the strike zone in the right depth of water, that's going to let you catch a lot more fish. You're going to be a lot more efficient, and long story short, you're going to be able to cover a lot more water. So pay attention to your angles. That's important. Angles is nothing but boat positioning.